In today's show, we're going to talk about SharePoint Lookup columns. So what we're going to do is we're going to use them with Powerapps and Power Automate and just go through all the nooks and crannies. You guys have so many questions about them. I want to get them answered. So we're going to talk about creating them, filtering, patching, Odata, and just a bunch of other stuff that goes into making lookup columns my least favorite SharePoint column type because they are so hard with Powerapps. But you still want to learn them, so I'm going to teach them. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with Powerapps 911. Those guys. And today, we're going to dive into SharePoint Lookup columns. And more specifically, SharePoint Lookup columns as in other regard to Powerapps and Power Automate. And the reason for this is they're difficult. They got a bunch of little weird nuances. So we're going to go and do some stuff. We're going to create the connection first, right? Make sure you understand how to do that from a SharePoint point of view. Talk about the ramifications of some of the select boxes, and there's a bunch of little check boxes. Make sure you understand what they do. Then we're going to pull them into a Power App. We're going to talk about how to filter the data, the fact that you can't sort them, and a couple other little nuances of getting the data out. So make sure you guys understand that. Then we're going to talk about patching them and using choices. So how to see the list, understand how that works. Cool. We'd understand Power Apps. And then we'll switch over to Flow for a second. And we'll talk about how to do an Odata query to return results from those, because weirdly enough, it's a completely different syntax. Probably not weirdly enough, probably expected, but either way, different than what we do over on the SharePoint side or on the Power App side. So we're going to talk about how to do it on the Flow side, because it's different. And then finally, how when you're creating an item in Flow, what syntax you'd have to use. So hopefully, if SharePoint Lookup columns are necessary evil for you, you'll feel completely comfortable with them. All right. That's enough blah, blah, blah. Let's go over to my desktop and actually start building and connecting stuff. Okay, so over here on my desktop, we're going to use the doggy list. So it's part of my videos or part of the training I've been teaching, I think in the last 3 weeks, 5 weeks in a row of like hands-on live training with people. Yikes. Anyway, I built a new list because, I don't know, I want to. And so today I was looking at my list. I'm like, all right, doggy data. It's pretty fun. It's just a bunch of random data about the dogs of Powerapps 911. But I wanted to make a lookup or related data. So what I want to do is come here to doggy data, and I want to add a pull in from my list called doggy, where'd I go? Pull in from the list called doggy department right there. And I want to pull in the departments. So I want to assign departments with this related list. This comes up a lot in SharePoint. So the first thing we need to do is like, all right, doggy departments are here. We're gonna go to doggy data, and we're gonna go to list settings. And then we're going to go down here and we're going to add a column. So create a column, and I'm going to call it dog department. I don't know why, but that's what we're going to call it. Now notice there's no space. Remember I did a video on that talked about how spaces are bad. So no space. And we're then going to go down here and say, all right, we want to do a lookup. Now when you choose lookup columns, down here at the bottom, you got to make some selections, right? So the first one is get information from. So what list do you want to pull it from? We want to pull it from doggy department. And then the screen will refresh. And then down here, you have to choose which column. This is more important than you might think, because whatever column you choose is the primary column. That'll be the column like we see in the SharePoint list by default. That'll also be the column over in Power Apps that we're going to filter by. That'll be the only column that we can filter by in a delegable way. So it's important that you understand which column you want, right? For me, it'd either be department name, or there is department manager. And so I want to do it off a department name, but you would want to make that choice. That is important. So there we go. Then we're going to go down here. And so we're not going to do allow multiple values. That adds like a whole nother tier of complexity. If you really want to see that, leave a comment. Well, maybe in the future, probably not, but maybe we'll talk about that. That's too far down the rabbit hole for me. And so down here, you also have the option, add a column to show each of these additional fields. So we're going to pull in department manager. Typically, I don't think we would. We're going to pull in ID too. We're going to pull in both of these so we can visualize them. But what's important to understand is like with Power Apps, we can't use them in the same way that we use the field that we choose as the primary up here. So that is important to get. We'll skip all this other stuff. We'll say, okay. All right. After a second, it's done. And so then now we can just go over here, and I always prefer just edit in grid view when I have to make mass edits like this. Scroll to the right. Now you see doggy department manager, ID. So these two, you can't do anything with. They're automatically going to populate. So if I choose the doggy department, and we choose that Chewy is definitely in the sleeping department. He's literally asleep right there. When we do that, and then if we exit our grid view, you're going to see that it went ahead and populated the department manager, which was Susie, Sleepy Susie, and then the dog department ID, because I wanted to pull that over just so you could kind of see it. But this is also going to help us in a little bit when we get to flow and we want to understand more about what's happening. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I can just come in here to edit grid view. And if I wanted all the dogs to be sleeping, remember you can just kind of grab this thing and just pull and it would do that. So here we'll do 3 sleeping. And then you know what, I'll hit pause real quick and I'll edit all these data real quick. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, perfect. So I'm done with that. Just so you can see, if you go to the right, I just randomly made up stuff for all of them, but I didn't think you want to watch me type all that in or select all that. So anyway, so they've all got related data. Yay! So now let's switch over to Powerapps and talk about how to consume that. So the first thing we're going to do here is say Canvas app from blank, and then we will just call this lookup playtime. I have no idea where that name came from. I just made it up. We'll say create. Now, while this is creating, one of the things I want to point out, I'll put a link to another video. I don't like lookup columns, right? And the reason for that is because of all the complexity that we're going through in this video. But you guys have to use them. I get that, so I'm not judging. I'm just telling you I personally don't use them unless I have to. So I made another video, that one I just pointed to, that has a way that I do this where I maintain the relationship myself. So if you wanted to watch that and see how I would do it if I got to design your data structure, then go check out that video. But the idea here is that if you're using SharePoint as SharePoint, so you want to go in the SharePoint browser and connect data and look it up and have relationships, lookup columns are awesome. SharePoint does all the work for you. Your users get that lookup experience in SharePoint. Life is grand. If you are building a standalone Power App and you just happen to be using SharePoint as your data source, lookup columns and all the magic things they do for free go out the window, right? Because you're going to have to build all the work in the Power App yourself. Since you have to build all the work in the Power App yourself, I find it's easier just to have 2 lists and then me personally, or in my app, maintain the relationships instead of using lookup columns. So anyway, other video will show you the other half if you want to see the way I think about it. That video is pretty old. It's 2 or 3 years old at this point. All the concepts are the same. It looks old. So anyway, so now we are here. First thing I want you to do is insert a gallery. And so insert gallery. Sometimes galleries show up right here beside data table. Sometimes they show up way over here. So just in case, some of my students last week were really confused by that. So I thought I'd be more obvious about it. All right. So now we'll do select a data source. We will type in SharePoint and spell it correctly. There we go. And then now I need to go find my site, SharePoint class. And we don't want to pull in doggy department. We're just going to pull in doggy data for right now. So say connect. Ta-da! There come in our dogs. And then I could just go right here and say, hey, I want to show that lookup column. So what would I do? I start to type in dog department. Now, if I do dog department, which is what we want to do, that's a record. Because in that field right now is 2 values. There's the ID and the value. The ID being the number, and then value being the actual word that we just saw. Remember, that was at top, that primary column we chose, and that's why that was so important. So we can do dog department dot value, like I just said, and we'll see, a combination of sleeping, eating, and playing on the dogs, which we would expect. All right. So that pulls the data in. Now you might have noticed here, we'll just add another label in here real quick. And so because I did, we can't do dog department dot and manager, right? Department manager. That's not an option here. That's the reason I went ahead and pulled in that other column. And so if you wanted to show, don't do it that way. Let's try again. This item dot dog department manager, and then dot value for that as well. And so now we see Sleepy Susie, Playful Pat, and Eater Earl. I don't know, whatever I did. Whatever goofy things I wrote, you see those values. So this is how, if you wanted to expose other values from the relationship, you can do that directly. Okay. So now we've got those two in here. Now what I want to talk about for a second is what if we want to filter? So this is actually super easy. So filter, and this was a YouTube question the other day. I was like, oh, I can answer that. So we'd say, I want to filter dog department dot value equals sleeping. And just like this, well, there you go. Now we get all the filter data. And we don't get the yellow triangle or the blue underline, so that means it's delegable, right? So we're getting all the data results back. And if you don't understand delegation, link up there, go watch the delegation video. You should never use SharePoint as a data source unless you understand delegation. So go watch that. Anyway, so now that we've got that, right, cool. So I can filter the data by one of these columns. Oh man, that got me all choked up. I had to pause the video, sorry. Okay, so that works. Now what if you wanted to filter on Sleepy Susie? So if you go up here and you say dog department, instead of that you say department manager dot value equals Sleepy Susie. So look, you see the blue, you see the yellow triangle. What does that tell you? It is not a delegable thing, right? If you don't understand what that is, go watch the other video, but this is bad. You would not want to do this. If Sleepy Susie was what you want to be able to filter on, you should have designed your lookup so that Sleepy Susie was the primary column. Okay? So that hopefully gives you some ideas. Another thing that I immediately jumped to was how would I sort on a lookup column? You cannot. So sort or sort by columns does not work with a SharePoint lookup column. Boo. Yep, at least I went and confirmed it, so you don't have to go deal with it. Okay, so that is the first pass, viewing that data. Now, another thing that you might find yourself wanting to do, say that you wanted to build a interface so that you could patch data and you want to be able to write this field, right? So that's a little more complicated. And to do that, what you're going to do is we can have a dropdown. This part is easy. In a dropdown, what you can use is choices, doggy data dot dog department, like this. And this will actually show you all the choices. See, so there is eating, playing, and sleeping in the dropdown. You could go over here. You could change if you wanted to show their IDs. I don't know why you would, but you could. So we got that. So now that we have a way to give them the options of valid values for that field, how would we write that data directly? Good question. We would add a button to our app and we would say something like, we want to patch doggy data, defaults doggy data, and then we're going to set the first name field to be Patch, since we just did it with Patch, and Patch is a valid dog name. First name is Patch. And then if we wanted to set dog department, you're going to say dog department. And so here what you can do, because we use the dropdown, is we can actually just say dropdown1 dot selected. Close that, close that. And so that will actually write our dog, right? Let's just hold down the Alt key and press the button. And if we scroll to the bottom, oh, we have the data filtered. I'm like, why am I not seeing it? All right, let's get rid of our filter. Doop. Bye-bye filter. You like my sound effects? Yeah, I don't either, but whatever. There we go. So patch is down here and it was patched to eating. So if you're using the drop-down to choose it, you can do that. Now, the other thing you might find yourself saying is, oh, Shane, I don't want to do this. I just want to hard code it to Sleepy Susie all the time. So how would you do something like that? You would tell me to go grab some code. Hold on. All right. So we're going to patch doggy department. I'm going to throw it on its own line to make this easier for us. And then we're going to throw this on its own line. And then all the cruff that goes at the end. So now you want to make this section just hard coded to Sleepy Susie. Okay, the first thing I need you to go tell me is, or they're just sleeping, which is apartments where get Sleepy Susie. But I need you to go over here and look and say, okay, sleeping's dog department ID is 1. You're going to need that. You're going to need both the ID and that primary column. So if we go back over here, we're going to paste in some code here. I stole this from somewhere else. That's okay. but this is going to be, I want the ID to be 1 and the department to be sleeping. And it's yelling at me because I think I grabbed one too many. Oh, I pasted in too much. I pasted in the column from the other app. There we go. My bad. All right. So this is what it should look like. So it's column name. And then remember, I told you that the columns are stored as records. So this is the open record and this is the close record. Oh, I have one too many of those again. This is the open record. Here is the close record. Oh, well, there you go. At least you didn't see me screw up. It probably makes it easier to learn. So this is what you're going to need. So every time it would be dog department and then this chunk of JSON. The ID is the ID of sleeping. So we wanted sleeping, we did 1. If we wanted playing, would be 3. Eating is 2. And so then now if we go over here, then this is the actual text sleeping. And then this hot garbage is just something you got to throw in there. So Odata type, Microsoft Azure connectors, SharePoint, expanded SP list, expanded references. I don't know. It's good. Remember, so these two close each other. This is the one closing your patch. And then this is closing your patch function. So remember, your list is going to be different. Your values are going to be different, but just go find your ID and your value and you've got that in here. And I've got a whole video. I feel like this is like the link to videos episode. There's another link up there to where I overview, like I do this in slower detail about patching your complex SharePoint column. So if you're confused by that, don't worry. I've got a video for that. Okay. So there you go. So that's how we use this from a Powerapps point of view. We've talked about filtering. We can't sort, how to use choices to get the data, how to patch using a dropdown, which is easy, or how to patch super directly, which is a little more confusing, but not bad. Once you just accept, you just put this garbage in without all the extra stuff I showed the first time. Shh, I messed up. Then we're good. Okay, so now that we've understood that, now let's go to Flow and let's talk about how we do some of this in Flow. So over in Flow, I'm gonna make myself a new flow real quick. Anytime I'm teaching, anytime I'm trying to figure out something like this morning when I wanted to understand this video, I just create myself an instant cloud flow and manually trigger it. So that way I don't have to go make fake data. I just press a button and it runs. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was how to query them. So in SharePoint, the SharePoint action there is get items. Remember, that is how you get a table of data, kind of like filter in SharePoint, but kind of, I don't know, like a gallery. It pulls back that whole list of SharePoint. So we grab that. For our site address, we're going to choose that same SharePoint site right here. And then for the list name, we're going to choose doggy data again. And so if you did this, this would get back all doggy data, but we want to filter it by our lookup column. So we're going to say show advanced options. And so here you have to do an Odata query. Yikes. Sounds a little scary. It is a little scary, but it's not bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my list. I'm going to go to list settings first. And what I want you guys to do is I want you to, let's get this up here. So we're going to look for doggy department. Okay. I want you to put your eyeballs right down here. All right. And so what you should see if I hover over doggy department is it says field equals dog department. And if it's a little chopped off, I can't tell if it is or not. I'm going to pull this up a tad. I think it might be. Let's pull this up a little bit. Let's try it again. Field, dog department. There we go. So field equals dog department. Capital D, no space. That's important because your syntax has to be perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're going to type in dog department, same exact capitalizations. And then we're going to do EQ for equals. And so then now what we have to do is we can't do sleeping. We have to use the ID. So if we want all the sleeping records, we know the ID for sleeping was 1. So we're just going to say EQ1. We're going to say save. I just realized that the picture behind me kind of makes my head look like a square head at times. Whatever, things I notice. Okay, so now we've done this. Now we can say test. And then we're going to say manually test. And then save and test. Test, test, test. Okay, looks like we can continue. We're almost there and run the flow. Like 17 button clicks later, we're one more click. Jeez, Pete's. So there you go. It went and ran and it got the item. So it did not fail. That makes me feel good. Now we could say click to download and count how many records we got. That was silly of me. I got too confused by my square head, quite frankly. So we're going to add another step here and we're going to do a compose. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say, I want to use the expression length, which is the same as a Powerapps expression count rows in a lot of ways. So we can say length, then click dynamic content and value of get items. There you go. It wrote a formula for us. We don't care what that formula says. If you hover, you can see it. But it wrote one. The idea is now if I rerun my test, I don't have to click yes 1,000 times again. Thank goodness. And once it's done, you'll see that we got 5 results back. And if we went to SharePoint and went to doggy data and said, you know, give me all the sleeping people, like we're not going to do it. But I promise you, if you count this, there'll be 5 of them over here. So it didn't give us all, there's like 12 records or so. It only gave us the 5 that are marked as sleeping. Perfect. So that is how you do an OData query or filter against it. You have to do proper name equals, and it has to be the ID. You can't use sleeping. You've got to use the number. Okay. So that's getting items. So then now what if you want to create an item? New step. We're going to do SharePoint again. And then under SharePoint, we're just going to search for create item. Perfect. So we choose our same SharePoint site. I really wish Flow would just know that this is where I was going, but Flow can't read my mind, unfortunately. Once we choose doggy data, so first name can't be blank, right? That's required. That's why I see the red star over here. So Flow did it. All the other ones are optional. So if you go to here to doggy department ID, I can hit the drop down here and it lets me choose eating, playing, or sleeping. Or to say eating. So if I choose eating, one of the things I like to do is up here you can click on the ellipses and you can say I want to peek code. And you'll see that it filled in item dog department ID is 2. So it figured out that eating, it showed me the word, but it knows that it really needs 2. So that's what it's going to send to SharePoint. So if we did this, this will absolutely create the item. That's pretty straightforward. What if you want to make this dynamic content though? What do you put there? I think I just gave you a hint, but let's talk about it. Hit the drop down, enter a custom value. So now it wants dynamic content. So this is not going to be eating. This is going to be 2, which is the representation of eating. So let's save and test this just to make sure that I am correct. Test that, test that, test that. I'll be honest, I had to remind myself of all these things this morning. I had to go try all this ahead of time. Which is good. I should be prepped, right? All right, so that says it created. And if we go to SharePoint, there should now be an item at the bottom called Flow did it. Nice. And then if we go to the right, it is set to eating, and that's because it had the ID of 2. So there you go. So when working in Flow, you just have to remember that it's all about the ID. When we were in Powerapps, we could have used the ID, or we were able to use that primary column. We were able to filter where the department name was sleeping. So both, so I guess they both could use ID, but only Powerapps can use that primary column. And neither of them give a darn about any of those extra columns that we were just selecting. So what do you guys think? A lot of fun? Hopefully you're enjoying this. Just a reminder that I've got a live training class. One more, I told you, right? This is I start week 4 this week. So a week from today, I start week 5, which will be a public class. So you can go out to training.powerapps911.com. And if you want to take a week of live training with me, you are more than welcome to come join. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below. Always happy to answer those for you guys. And yeah, I don't know. Other than that, happy Mother's Day. Shout out to the moms. Of course, my wife is, I don't know what she's doing right now. I'm probably in trouble for being down here, but I may have to keep you guys happy too. So I made a video. Anyway, with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Before you go, be sure to click on the subscribe button over here so that way you'll be notified when new videos come out. If you need any help or you want to work together, whether your problem's big or small, check us out at Powerapps 911. We do it all. I rhymed. Or if you're looking for more formal training offerings, we have those linked up here somewhere. So check them out. Thanks and have a great day.